Milton hung back, finding a spot in the shadows of a recessed doorway. He watched as Marco climbed the stairs inside, his silhouette visible through the frosted glass of the stairwell window. When he reached the second floor, a light flicked on briefly before the blinds closed, cutting off Milton's view. The area around him was quiet. Most of the windows were dark, though a faint glow spilled from a few, their curtains drawn tight. A narrow canal ran alongside the street, the water rippling gently in the moonlight. Across from the apartment, a wooden bench sat beneath a street lamp that cast a pale circle of light onto the cobblestones. Milton crossed the street, taking a seat on the bench where he could keep an eye on the building without drawing too much attention. This wasn't a wealthy neighbourhood. The residents hadn't yet been driven out by relentlessly rising rents and the crush of tourism, but Milton could see the signs of strain. The streets were clean but worn, the buildings tired but not neglected. It was a place for people who worked hard and lived quietly. Milton adjusted his position on the bench, withdrawing into the shadows a little more. He stared up at the window where he had seen Marco and allowed his thoughts to drift. He might not understand TrueCoin or cryptocurrency, but he had helped enough people since leaving the group to have developed an eye for those who needed him. Isabel might have offered Marco hope at this afternoon's meeting, but the legal process was slow and success far from guaranteed. It was apparent that TrueCoin had stolen millions from its marks, and Valentina Rossi and the others behind it would disappear into the ether at the first sign of trouble. Would the lawyers be able to find them? Maybe. Would they be able to claw back the money that had been taken? That seemed unlikely. Would Milton? It was hard to say without knowing more. But he had access to tactics the lawyers did not, and in his experience, they were often a lot more effective. He stood and turned, retracing his steps back to the canal. The 12 steps of AA required Milton to atone for the things that he'd done, and since many of those against whom he had transgressed were no longer alive to receive his penance, he decided to help others. Lending a hand to people like Marco had become Milton's calling. It wasn't much, and could never balance out his sins, but it was something. Better than numbing himself with booze until he didn't know up from down, stumbling from violent encounter to violent encounter until someone put him out of his misery. He looked for those who found themselves facing situations they couldn't handle alone, and Marco, Carlo, and the others certainly met his criteria. Milton had a lot to learn about who was responsible for what had happened to them, but he had settled on one thing. He wanted to help, and he would.